With WrestleMania finally taking place in front of actual people again, I think we can all agree that this past year of professional wrestling was definitely missing something. And whether it was having no fans in attendance, having planted ones, or having digital ones, there's just no substitute for the real thing. And I think all of us pretty much know that. But we don't really take the time to wonder why. Although, we should. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Because today... A big thank you to my Patreon supporters such as Bob86 and Cool Ass Jack. Alright, saying that professional wrestling is better with live fans is definitely something of a duh statement.
And at the end of the play, he got up, and he just started banging his hands together.
But that's not the point. The point is, how many of us really take the time to explore the deep dive reasons as to why exactly that is? Well, if you've been to this channel before, I'm pretty sure you know that taking deep dives into professional wrestling is what I'm all about. So for today's episode, we're going to be looking at three main factors. One from the wrestler's point of view, one from the bookers, and one from the fans. And we're going to see how all of these relate and connect to each other in order to make a product that's truly greater than the sum of its parts. And to do this, let's start by looking at things from the wrestler side of the equation. Alright, so the first article of evidence that I'm going to use is a somewhat controversial concept, but regardless of which side of the line you're on, I think we can all agree that for some wrestlers it definitely makes a huge difference. So what is this concept? Well, it's the idea of calling in the ring. And by this I mean calling spots and composing the match on the fly. Sure, the finish is usually plotted out as well as maybe a couple of other spots, but in terms of the go-between stuff, calling in the ring means that the wrestlers themselves determine what goes on, and they're figuring all of that out as it happens. But what makes this controversial is that not everyone does it. Even great in-ring legends like Randy Savage was against it, as he much preferred plotting out entire matches start to finish well in advance. Furthermore, a lot of WWE matches during the modern era have been heavily criticized for being overly rehearsed. Now, with all that being said, there are still plenty of wrestlers out there who prefer to call things in the ring even today, and one of the major reasons why they feel that way is because they think it's best to have an outside third party being able to serve as director of the match, if you will, and that director just so happens to be the fans themselves. When calling in the ring, wrestlers are actively listening to the audience and seeing where they are responsive. Wrestlers know that when the fans go quiet, they're not being entertained by whatever's going on in the ring, so they adjust their plans in order to please the audience. And every crowd is different. Some like big hoss wrestling, some like technical chain grappling, and some audiences prefer high spots. And you have no idea of what kind of specific wrestling that specific crowd is going to want at that specific time until you go out there and you start to wrestle. So in that case, a lot of wrestlers just love calling in the ring, thriving off the live crowd because they get instant feedback on what will best please their customers at that particular moment. But don't think that this is limited to just wrestlers, as performers of any kind definitely feed off of the energy of a live crowd, because those nerves and the rush of adrenaline that only comes from having all eyes on you is what fuels a lot of wrestlers to do their very best. And for sports, it's also what home court advantage is all about. However, this isn't just true for performers, as it really does also help the booking side of things as well. Live audience response matters to a conscientious booker because it informs them directly about what works and what doesn't. Without live fans, the only feedback bookers have to go on is the internet, which is not always the most accurate reflection of how the majority of fans feel. But in the past year, since it was all that bookers had to go off of, it was the only thing that could really influence their plans. Live crowds matter to those who produce wrestling just like it does in the film industry. For instance, like with movie test screenings, where a small audience would get to watch a movie early while the director and producers gauge their reactions to see if they can improve upon the film. Oh, and while we're talking about fan reactions, there is something else that I think can teach us a lot about them, and it's a surprising source. It's the laugh track. No, I'm serious. Don't start leaving negative comments just yet. Hear me out first, okay? While the laugh track might have a somewhat dubious reputation nowadays, since for the most part sitcoms really don't use them anymore, the laugh track still does have an interesting history, and one that we can still learn a lot from. Okay, so yes, the major complaint audiences have when it comes to the laugh track is that they feel that they don't need to be told when to laugh, or gasp, or applaud for that matter either. However, that's not its real purpose. When we take a look at television history, pre-recorded audience sounds were definitely a major part throughout the majority of it, but that's only so because of all the other performance history that came before all of that. For centuries, performances, plays, concerts, these were all done before a live audience, and only for a live audience. When you stop to think about it, even going out to the movies is a communal event. And also, during the silent film era, the audience was a major part of a movie's soundtrack. And all of this worked to shape the behavior of us, the audience, as we are today. We're just used to hearing emotional responses whenever we're attending a performance. And so, when the radio first allowed people to hear a performance from their home without a large group around them, something was a bit off. Natural resting points and the flow of performances were built upon the idea of having a live crowd, and became just a part of the performance as a whole, such as pausing for laughter. Which is definitely a good thing because it keeps the audience from having to miss what's being said next while they're laughing. However, once the radio was invented and performances like radio plays began airing, pausing for audience reactions resulted in having awkward silences, which you may have noticed yourself in the past year, as we've had a lot of late night talk shows go on, but without the benefit of having a live audience. However, they were still pausing for laughter, which just kind of makes the whole thing a little weird.
Grind me into burgers and make my skin into a clutch purse.
And this is why we have the laugh track. It's there to make silence just a little less uncomfortable. However, as good as technology might be, no matter how sophisticated, pumped-in crowd sounds are never going to replace real people having real emotional responses. Which is why some TV shows made an effort to have real people as opposed to pre-recorded ones.
Cheers is filmed before a live studio audience.
And it's also why the Thunderdome is better than echoey grunts and footsteps, but still no substitution for real applause. Oh, and while we're on that subject, have you ever wondered why we applaud in the first place? Well, while the exact origins of that are unknown, we do know that dating as far back as ancient Greece, audiences were expressing themselves by making noise. However, they weren't just restricted to clapping. They also did other things like flapping their togas and also snapping. However, the humble hand clap just proved to be one of the easiest and loudest ways to make some noise, and it was a lot easier to keep going and with a lot less effort than shouting. Not that people didn't do that too. Although, what's really interesting to me is that when it comes to clapping, it's pretty much understood around the entire world. People from completely different cultures and completely different backgrounds all know to clap their hands in order to show approval for a performance that they like. And ultimately, that's what it really all comes down to. A study was conducted that showed that psychologically, we applaud because it unites us. There is a connection that we all feel with each other when we are all sharing our emotional responses together, especially after we experience a performance. And non-verbal expressions of emotion is how humanity connects to itself in any language. Which is why people still clap at the end of a movie. They're not clapping for the performers who aren't there, but rather, they're clapping for everyone who is. Well, there you go. Some interesting information about crowd responses, but what are some of your favorite crowd experiences? Let me know down in the comments, and please give this video a like and make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, Dave knows.